Have you ever noticed that some of the most powerful moments in life don't come wrapped in joy, but in struggle? Think about it. The heartbreak that forced you to discover who you really are. The illness that slowed you down enough to realize what truly matters. The failure that humbled your pride, only to build a deeper strength within you. It almost feels unfair, doesn't it? Life throws us into the fire, and only later, sometimes years later, we realize the fire was shaping us into someone we could have never become otherwise. This paradox sits at the very heart of Buddhism. The Buddha himself didn't awaken by escaping pain. He awakened by walking directly into it, understanding it, and seeing it for what it really is. Suffering, what Buddhism calls dukkha, wasn't an obstacle on his path. It was the path. Most of us spend our lives running from pain. We numb it, deny it, distract ourselves, or blame others for it. But here's the truth that the awakened ones whisper to us across centuries. Within pain lies a hidden gift, and those who dare to open it find not despair but liberation. Now, this might sound strange. Why would anyone be grateful for suffering? Isn't gratitude supposed to be reserved for blessings, for joy, for peace? That's what our ordinary minds tell us. But the awakened mind sees something else. Gratitude doesn't come after pain is gone. Gratitude grows inside the pain itself, like a lotus rising out of muddy water. Imagine this: you plant a seed in the soil, but it isn't soft sunlight alone that makes it grow. It's the pressure of the earth, the resistance of the dirt, even the darkness underground. Without that struggle, the seed would never break open, never reach for the sky. Our lives are no different. The very difficulties we curse are often the soil of awakening. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he wasn't offered comfort. He was met with every temptation of Mara, the embodiment of fear, desire, and doubt. But instead of resisting, he touched the earth. He allowed the storm to pass through him. And in doing so, he discovered a truth that would echo for millennia. Pain is not the end. It is a doorway. Think about your own life. The breakup that shattered your heart, didn't it also teach you the fragility of attachment? The illness that weakened your body, didn't it also teach you compassion for others who suffer? The failure that burned your pride, didn't it also strip away illusions and force you to see yourself more clearly? Of course, in the moment, pain feels like an enemy. No one enjoys grief or despair. But when we shift our perspective, when we begin to see suffering not as punishment but as teacher, something extraordinary happens. Gratitude is born, not the shallow kind of gratitude for material gain, but a deep, unshakable thankfulness that life itself has given us a chance to awaken. There's a story in Zen about a monk who asked his master, "What is the greatest blessing?" The master replied, "A good heart." The monk pressed further, "And how does one get a good heart?" The master smiled through suffering. The student was confused, even offended. But years later, after countless trials, he finally understood. Every hardship had softened his arrogance, deepened his empathy, and cracked his heart wide open. Without those hardships, his so-called blessings would have been empty. This is why the awakened one is grateful even for suffering. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending pain feels good. Gratitude means recognizing that pain itself is fertile ground for wisdom, compassion, and freedom. And maybe you've seen this truth too, in subtle ways. Maybe you've met someone who's gone through unimaginable loss yet radiates a quiet strength, a calm presence that feels unshakable. They don't deny their pain, but they also don't drown in it. Somehow, they've turned it into something sacred. That's the hidden gift of pain. The world tells us to chase happiness, to avoid discomfort at all costs. But what if that's the very reason so many people feel empty, restless, dissatisfied? The Buddha's radical insight was this: happiness isn't found by avoiding suffering. Happiness is found by understanding suffering, because once you truly see it, suffering transforms. It stops being a prison and becomes a key. And here's the miracle: gratitude follows naturally. Just as a storm clears the sky, pain clears the illusions we cling to. It strips away what is false, leaving only what is real. The awakened one doesn't just survive suffering. He bows to it, thanks it, and recognizes it as the path that led him home. So the question is not whether life will bring pain. it will. The question is, will you run from it or will you listen to what it has to teach? If you dare to listen, if you dare to open that hidden gift, then pain ceases to be something you fear. It becomes something you embrace, not because it feels pleasant, but because it carries within it the seed of awakening. And that seed, if you nurture it, if you give it the sunlight of awareness, the water of mindfulness, and the soil of patience, it will grow into something beyond imagination. It will grow into freedom. The night was silent, but inside the young ascetic Siddhartha Gautama, a storm raged. He had tried everything, years of severe fasting, breathless meditation, wandering from one teacher to another. His body was frail, his mind exhausted. Yet the peace he longed for still seemed out of reach. Most of us would have given up. But Siddhartha did something different. He stopped running, both from pleasure and from pain. He sat down under the shade of a Bodhi tree, crossed his legs, placed his hands upon his lap, and made a vow. I will not rise from this seat until I find the truth. It sounds simple, but imagine the weight of that decision. Imagine the courage it takes to stop searching outside and instead confront every shadow within yourself. That's what he did. And that night, as the moon drifted across the sky, Siddhartha entered the deepest battle a human being can face, the battle with his own mind. Temptations came. Mara, the embodiment of illusion, appeared with weapons of fear, with daughters of desire, with voices of doubt. Each thought whispered, "You're not strong enough. You'll never make it. Turn back while you can." Have you ever heard those voices? The ones that creep in when you're about to change your life. The voices that tell you to stay small, to stay safe, to stay asleep. Siddhartha heard them too, but he did not fight them with anger. He simply placed his hand upon the earth, calling it to witness his vow. In that gesture he declared, "I am here. I will not run. This suffering is not my enemy. It is my teacher." And so he stayed. Hour by hour, layer by layer, he watched his mind unfold. He saw his past lives flash before him, countless cycles of birth and death, joy and sorrow, pleasure and loss. He saw the endless wheel of samsara turning, trapping beings in the same patterns over and over again. But he also saw something more, the causes of this suffering. Craving, clinging, ignorance, the desperate attempt to hold on to what cannot last. It was not life itself that brought pain, it was the way beings related to life. This realization pierced him like lightning. Suffering was not random. It followed a pattern, a law as natural as gravity. And if the causes could be understood, they could also be released. In the stillness of that night, Siddhartha saw the four noble truths. 1. Life inevitably involves suffering. 2. Suffering has a cause. 3. That cause can end. 4. There is a path that leads to that end. This was not philosophy, it was direct experience. He saw it as clearly as you see the sunrise after a long night. And with this vision, something inside him shifted forever. He awakened. The chains of craving fell away. The illusions dissolved. For the first time, he saw reality exactly as it was, impermanent, interdependent, radiant. Suffering was no longer a prison. It was the very doorway to freedom. This is why the awakened one is grateful even for suffering. Without the sting of life's hardships, there would have been no reason to search, no urgency to seek truth, no path to follow. Suffering is what led him to sit beneath that tree. Suffering is what revealed the pattern of existence. Suffering was the key that unlocked enlightenment. And notice the beauty of this. The Bodhi tree did not grant him miracles. No divine being whispered secrets into his ear. Everything he saw was already here, hidden in plain sight. But it took the raw honesty of facing suffering directly to uncover it. Think about your own struggles for a moment. How often do you see them as punishments, as cruel accidents, as proof that life is unfair? But what if they are the same invitations that the Buddha received? What if every hardship is a Bodhi tree waiting for you to sit beneath it? The Buddha did not conquer suffering by escaping it. He conquered it by understanding it. And in that understanding, suffering transformed into compassion, wisdom, and peace. The image of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree is not just history, it is a mirror. It reflects our own potential. Every one of us has a Bodhi tree moment, whether we realize it or not. A moment when running no longer works, when we are forced to sit with our pain, when the only way out is through. And if we stay, if we dare to look suffering in the eye instead of turning away, we too may glimpse what the Buddha saw, that even in the darkest night, the seeds of awakening are already within us. The story doesn't end with his enlightenment. It begins there. Because what he saw under the Bodhi tree was not just for himself, it was for all beings. He rose from meditation not as Siddhartha the seeker, but as the Buddha, the awakened one, carrying a truth that would ripple through centuries. And the essence of that truth is simple yet revolutionary. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your teacher. And when you embrace it with awareness, gratitude naturally arises. It is this gratitude that transforms the story of suffering into the story of awakening. And that story is still unfolding in your life, in mine, in the lives of everyone who dares to stop running and simply sit beneath their own Bodhi tree. If the Buddha could sit beneath the Bodhi tree and face suffering without fear, why do most of us spend our lives running from it? Why do we resist what is, in truth, the very teacher that could guide us toward freedom? The answer lies in the ordinary mind, our default setting, conditioned by habit and fear. From the moment we are born, we are taught to seek comfort and avoid pain. Cry and someone soothes you. Fall and someone picks you up. Lose and someone consoles you. There is nothing wrong with care, of course. But over time, this natural instinct to avoid discomfort hardens into a subtle form of resistance. Resistance is sneaky. It doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it's quiet, a thought that says, this shouldn't be happening to me. Sometimes it's loud, anger, blame, anxiety, despair. We push against pain, hoping that by rejecting it, we can make it disappear. Yet here's the irony. The more we resist, the more suffering we create. Every mental no becomes another layer of tension. Every desperate attempt to escape creates a tug-of-war inside our own hearts. It is as if we are trying to swim upstream in a river that is flowing exactly where it needs to go. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Think of a time you experienced loss, disappointment, or failure. Now recall your initial reaction. Was it denial, anger, bargaining? The very mind that resisted the experience amplified the pain. And in resisting, we also lose the opportunity to see the lesson hidden within the moment. This is the trap of the ordinary mind. It confuses pain with catastrophe, discomfort with danger, loss with punishment. It measures life by the absence of suffering, never by the depth of insight it can provide. And so we toil endlessly, chasing pleasure, avoiding discomfort, while the most profound teachers, our own hardships, stand quietly at our side, waiting to be noticed. Siddhartha's journey under the Bodhi tree illuminates this contrast. He didn't resist fear, desire, or doubt. He faced them head-on. The ordinary mind screams, run, hide, fight, distract yourself. The awakened mind whispers, sit, observe, learn. And what does it learn? First, that suffering is universal. Everyone experiences it. Everyone wrestles with it. No one is immune. Second, that suffering is impermanent. It comes, it teaches, it passes. Third, that resisting it is optional. We can choose to accept, to witness, to transform it. But for ordinary minds, these realizations are hard to grasp. Fear and attachment are powerful. Fear makes us cling to what we think will make us safe: money, status, relationships, approval. Attachment convinces us that our identity is fixed, that the world owes us comfort, that loss is intolerable. And so, even when we glimpse the potential for growth within pain, the mind recoils. We see this in small ways every day. A slight criticism at work makes us defensive. A harsh word from a loved one triggers resentment. A minor inconvenience spirals into frustration. Each reaction is a rehearsal of resistance, a microcosm of the larger struggle we face with life's inevitable suffering. Yet there is hope. Recognizing the ordinary mind is the first step toward liberation. Awareness itself begins to loosen the grip of resistance. When we pause to see our reactions clearly, without judgment, without immediate action, we begin to notice the patterns. Here is fear, here is attachment, here is avoidance. Observation is the doorway, And here's the subtle miracle. When we stop resisting, suffering begins to speak. It tells us what we are clinging to. It exposes illusions. It invites us to grow. Resistance, after all, is just the mind's attempt to control life. Acceptance is the mind's willingness to learn from life. Imagine a river. The ordinary mind fights against the current, exhausting itself, creating whirlpools and turbulence. The awakened mind lets the river flow, allowing the water to shape the stones, carve the banks, and nourish the earth along its path. The current remains the same, but the experience transforms entirely. It's not easy. Ordinary minds are deeply habituated. Resistance comes instinctively. That's why the Buddha emphasized practice, mindfulness, meditation, and insight. These are the tools that gradually retrain the mind to meet pain with curiosity instead of panic, with gratitude instead of judgment, with wisdom instead of fear. Consider a simple act, noticing your breath as you sit with discomfort. At first, the mind resists. It wants to run, to fix, to avoid. But if you simply observe, you discover that the discomfort shifts, changes, and eventually reveals something vital about your inner life. Resistance fades, insight arises. Gratitude quietly follows. This is the alchemy of suffering. Ordinary minds see only ash, smoke, and fire. Awakened minds see the same flames and recognize the warmth, the light, the potential for transformation. So why do ordinary minds resist suffering? Because resistance feels safer than surrender. Because it seems easier to cling than to release. Because our culture, our upbringing, and even our own egos whisper that pain is the enemy. But the truth, as Siddhartha discovered under the Bodhi tree, is far more radical. Pain is not the enemy. Resistance is optional. And the moment we begin to meet suffering without aversion, we step onto the path that leads from fear to freedom, from reaction to insight, from ordinary existence to awakening. And as we start to understand this, we can begin to ask the deeper question. If resistance only prolongs suffering, what might happen if we let go? What doors might open if, instead of turning away, we leaned in? This is where the next chapter begins, exploring how suffering, once embraced, becomes the most patient, uncompromising teacher. Because the ordinary mind resists, but the awakened mind learns. And in learning, suffering transforms from curse to gift. Pain, it arrives without invitation. Sometimes it knocks loudly with heartbreak, illness, or loss. Sometimes it creeps in quietly with doubt, regret, or subtle disappointment. Most of us see it as an intruder, a cruel twist of fate, something to be avoided at all costs. Yet in the heart of Buddhist teaching lies a startling truth. Pain is the most honest teacher we will ever encounter. And like any great teacher, it has its own methods, often harsh, sometimes relentless, but always aiming to awaken us. Think of the young Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree. The temptations of Mara weren't gentle nudges. They were fierce confrontations with fear, desire, and doubt. And yet, those very confrontations revealed the nature of the mind and the causes of suffering. Pain, in all its forms, became the mirror reflecting reality back to him. We too have our Bodhi tree moments. Perhaps it is the sudden end of a long-term relationship that forces us to confront our attachments. Perhaps it is a career setback that strips away the illusions of control. Perhaps it is the illness of a loved one that awakens us to the fragile beauty of life. Pain is honest. It does not flatter. It does not coddle. It exposes what we cling to, what we resist, and where we have been blind. And in that exposure lies the opportunity for transformation. How do we turn pain into a teacher? First, we must stop running. Ordinary minds react, push away, or distract. Awakened minds pause, breathe, and observe. Mindfulness allows us to meet pain without flinching, to watch it rise and fall, and to understand its message. Second, we must listen. Pain speaks in its own language, through emotions, through the body, through circumstances. It tells us what we value, what we fear, what we ignore. In resisting it, we miss the lesson. In listening, we gain insight. Consider grief. It feels unbearable at first, a heavy weight that crushes the chest. But if we allow ourselves to sit with it, to feel every jagged edge of loss, we begin to notice something remarkable. The grief itself contains the seeds of compassion. Experiencing loss deeply opens our hearts to the suffering of others. The very thing we resist becomes the source of our deepest empathy. Or consider failure. The sting of a missed opportunity can be humiliating, even devastating. Yet failure teaches resilience, creativity, humility. It strips away arrogance and forces us to confront reality. Without it, we might never discover our true potential, never understand the value of perseverance, never recognize the path we are meant to walk. Pain teaches not only what we are clinging to, but also what is truly essential. It draws a line in the sand, asking us to pay attention, to learn, to awaken. And in this learning, a quiet gratitude begins to emerge, not for the suffering itself in the way we might celebrate a party, but for the insight, growth, and clarity it brings. There is a story in Zen. A young monk approached his master, lamenting the hardships of life. "Why must suffering follow me everywhere?" he asked. The master led him to a field of stones and said, "These stones were once clay. The fire of life hardened them into what they are. You complain about the fire, but without it you would still be soft, shapeless, and unformed." The lesson is simple but profound. Pain shapes us. It tests us. It molds our character, our perception, our wisdom. And just like clay fired in the kiln, we are stronger, more resilient, and more capable of insight because of it. Practically speaking, turning pain into a teacher involves 3 steps. 1. Acknowledgement. Admit it exists. Name it. Sit with it. This is mindfulness in action. 2. Inquiry. Ask what it is showing you. What attachment, fear, or illusion is it revealing? 3. Integration. Allow the insight to transform your perspective, your behavior, your understanding. It's not instant. Pain is persistent and lessons are subtle. But over time, these lessons accumulate. They form the foundation of wisdom and compassion. They shift our consciousness from victimhood to agency, from resistance to understanding, from suffering to awakening. The awakened one, therefore, does not wish pain away. He does not curse it or deny it. He bows to it, thanks it, and studies it carefully. Each hardship becomes a chapter in the book of wisdom, each trial a stepping stone toward liberation. And here lies the beauty. The very same pain that could have crushed us becomes the soil in which gratitude, insight, and resilience grow. What once seemed unbearable becomes a guide, pointing us toward freedom. So the next time suffering knocks at your door, consider this. Instead of turning away, lean in. Observe it. Listen to it. Ask what it has to teach. And in doing so, you may discover the quiet, unshakable teacher that has been waiting for you all along. The path is never easy. Pain is never pleasant. But when we transform it into a teacher, every pang, every ache, every heartbreak becomes a lesson in awakening, a guidepost pointing toward the truth that the Buddha discovered beneath the Bodhi tree. And as we learn to see suffering this way, we step naturally into the next stage of our journey, the deep, unexpected gratitude that arises when we embrace life exactly as it is, without resistance, without fear, with clarity, and with an open heart. Imagine standing in the eye of a storm. The wind howls, rain lashes, the world is chaos, but somehow in that center of turmoil there is stillness. A moment, brief and fragile, where you are aware, awake, and profoundly present. This is the essence of gratitude in the midst of struggle. Most people think gratitude is something we feel only when life is easy, when the sun is shining, when everything falls into place. But the truth is far more radical. True gratitude doesn't wait for comfort. It blooms in the soil of difficulty, nourished by struggle, hardship, and pain. Consider a simple example. A person loses a job they thought defined them. Panic rises, fear strikes deep, and the world seems to crumble. Yet in the quiet moments of reflection, a subtle awareness begins. Perhaps this loss is not an ending, but a nudge, a hidden invitation. Perhaps it is the opportunity to discover untapped creativity, a new path, or a life more aligned with their true self. Gratitude begins as a spark, a recognition that even the struggle has value. The Buddha understood this intimately. His awakening was not the result of comfort or ease. It was born in the crucible of relentless inner struggle, the confrontation with fear, desire, and ignorance. Without the trials he faced beneath the Bodhi tree, there would have been no insight, no compassion, no freedom. The very challenges that seemed unbearable were, in fact, the gifts that led him to awakening. Gratitude in struggle is not about pretending pain doesn't exist. It's not about forcing a smile or denying reality. It is about perceiving a deeper dimension, seeing that within the suffering lies opportunity, clarity, and the chance for transformation. It is about recognizing that the fire that burns is the same fire that purifies. Think about illness. When the body falters, when discomfort or pain intrudes, most minds resist, complain, and despair. But if we can cultivate even a small shift in perspective, something remarkable happens. The illness becomes a teacher, showing us impermanence, vulnerability, and the preciousness of life. We begin to feel gratitude not for the pain itself, but for the wisdom it brings, for the empathy it awakens, for the insight into what truly matters. There's a story in Zen that illustrates this beautifully. A monk asked his master, "How do I endure suffering?" The master handed him a cup of water, then poured in tea until it overflowed. The monk protested, "It's too much. I can't hold it." The master smiled and said, "Your mind is like this cup. When it is full of resentment, fear, and resistance, there is no room to see what is. Empty the cup and then even suffering can be received as a teacher." Gratitude then begins with this emptying. It begins with release, the willingness to stop resisting, to stop blaming, to stop demanding that life be different from what it is. And in that space we can see the hidden blessings, lessons learned, strength developed, compassion deepened. Consider another example, a parent grieving the loss of a child. At first, gratitude seems impossible, even cruel. But over time, as they honor the memory and feel the depth of their love, something subtle arises. A gratitude for the love that once was, for the moments shared, for the profound capacity of the heart to endure and expand. In the depths of sorrow, gratitude emerges not as denial of pain, but as recognition of the richness of life itself. This is the paradox of the awakened mind. Ordinary minds see suffering as punishment, as something to escape. Awakened minds see suffering as an essential part of the journey, a guide pointing toward insight, freedom, and compassion. Gratitude is the bridge that transforms pain into understanding, fear into clarity, and struggle into wisdom. And gratitude in struggle is contagious. When we meet hardship with acceptance and appreciation, we model resilience for others. Our presence becomes a quiet beacon, showing that even in difficulty, life can be meaningful. The storms do not disappear, but our perception changes. We see the storm not as an enemy, but as a dance of forces that shapes and strengthens us. Practically, cultivating gratitude amidst struggle requires attention and practice. Begin with small moments. Notice the air you breathe, the body that carries you despite fatigue or illness, the mind that learns even through suffering. Then extend your awareness to larger experiences, the challenges that have tested you, the relationships that have strained and strengthened you, the obstacles that have shaped your path. Each is an opportunity to cultivate appreciation, insight, and patience. Meditation can guide this process. By observing sensations, thoughts, and emotions without judgment, we begin to see that suffering is not permanent, nor is it the whole story. Gratitude arises naturally as the mind becomes spacious, attentive, and awake. The very experience that once seemed intolerable becomes a doorway into deeper understanding. In the end, the awakened one does not wait for life to be perfect to feel grateful. They do not rely on circumstances to grant peace. Instead, they recognize that even in struggle, life offers profound gifts, the chance to grow, to learn, to awaken. Pain is no longer a threat. It is a companion, a teacher, a guide along the path. And as this awareness deepens, we begin to notice a subtle shift in how we live. The world appears richer, more vivid, more immediate. Joy and sorrow are no longer opposites but part of the same flow. Gratitude is not a fleeting emotion but a fundamental way of perceiving life. It transforms every encounter, every challenge, every ordinary moment into an opportunity for awakening. So the next time life feels heavy, remember this. Within the struggle lies a hidden gift. Within the hardship lies a teacher. Within the storm lies the calm eye where gratitude quietly blooms. And in that gratitude, even the darkest moments begin to shine with the light of insight and the promise of transformation. The awakened one does not merely endure suffering. They embrace it, learn from it, and turn it into a path that leads toward freedom. And in that embrace, gratitude is born. Pain is universal, yet each life experiences it differently. It may strike suddenly or linger quietly, shaping the contours of our inner world. But in every story of awakening, suffering appears not as a detour but as the very catalyst for transformation. Let's start with the Buddha himself. Before the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha endured years of extreme asceticism. He starved his body in search of enlightenment, thinking deprivation was the path to wisdom. Yet, in those moments of physical and mental suffering, he realized something profound. Neither indulgence nor denial alone would reveal the truth. It was the confrontation with his own limits, the intimate engagement with pain that led him to the ultimate insight. What seemed unbearable became the doorway to liberation. This principle echoes throughout Buddhist history. Take the story of Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi. Early in life, he was consumed by rage and vengeance, actions that brought deep suffering to himself and others. Yet through years of harsh training, solitude, and rigorous meditation, he transformed that very suffering into wisdom, compassion, and artistic expression. Milarepa's songs, born from hardship, are still sung today, proof that pain can become a profound teacher and even a source of beauty. Or consider the Zen tradition. A monk once asked his teacher, "How do I find enlightenment?" The master handed him a stick and said, "Use this to break your attachments." Confused, the monk struck his own misconceptions, enduring frustration, doubt, and exhaustion. It was only through persistent engagement with difficulty, through suffering he could not avoid, that clarity emerged. The monk awakened, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. These stories are not ancient relics, they are mirrors for our modern lives. Look around and you'll see ordinary people transformed by suffering. A parent facing the illness of a child discovers patience and unconditional love they never knew existed. A person navigating a career setback learns resilience, humility, and hidden strengths. Someone who loses a loved one uncovers a depth of empathy and appreciation for life itself. Pain exposes our attachments. It highlights illusions. It asks, quietly yet insistently, what are you holding onto that no longer serves you? What masks are you wearing that need to fall away? And when we answer with mindfulness, courage, and compassion, awakening begins. There is a modern story that illustrates this beautifully. A young woman, once driven by perfectionism and fear of failure, faced a devastating loss. Her dream career slipped away in a moment of unforeseen circumstances. Initially, she was consumed by despair, but gradually she began to see the hidden lessons. She discovered creativity she had suppressed, empathy she had overlooked, and a sense of purpose she had never dared to pursue. Her suffering became the fertile ground for her awakening, teaching her that life's setbacks were not punishments but invitations. Even small moments can awaken us. The sting of a harsh word, the frustration of unmet expectations, the ache of loneliness. These everyday pains are teachers in disguise. If we can observe them without judgment, without resistance, they reveal truths about ourselves, our fears, desires, and potential for growth. The key is to meet suffering directly, as Siddhartha did, and to allow it to guide us rather than dominate us. Stories of awakening through suffering share common threads. First, they confront reality fully. Pain is acknowledged, not denied. Second, they cultivate patience. Transformation does not happen overnight. Third, they integrate insight. The lessons of suffering are applied, shaping character, perception, and relationships. And finally, they inspire compassion. Those who have faced suffering intimately often become the most understanding, the most empathetic, the most alive to the pain of others. Even in literature and film, we see this archetype. The hero or heroine is forged in struggle. They fail, they suffer, they stumble, and through that very suffering they grow, they awaken, they transcend their former selves. It is a universal truth. Growth and awakening rarely come without trial, challenge, and discomfort. So what do these stories teach us about our own lives? They remind us that suffering is not a curse, but a companion. It is not something to escape, but something to engage with consciously. Every heartbreak, failure, illness, or loss carries within it a seed of awakening. The moment we stop resisting and start learning, we step into a narrative far larger than ourselves. A story of resilience, insight, and transformation that has echoed through centuries. And here is the subtle beauty. The lessons of suffering are not always grand or dramatic. Sometimes they appear in small, ordinary ways. A conversation that challenges our assumptions. A mistake that humbles us. A moment of discomfort that forces presence. Each instance is a teacher if we are willing to listen. The awakened one knows that life is a continuous series of such lessons. Gratitude arises naturally, not from ignoring hardship, but from embracing it. Struggle becomes sacred, not because it is pleasurable, but because it opens the door to wisdom, empathy, and the profound realization that nothing in life is wasted. As you listen to these stories, consider your own life. What struggles have shaped you? What hardships have quietly guided you toward understanding, compassion, or strength? The Buddha, Milarepa, the Zen monks, the modern seekers, they all reveal the same truth. Suffering, when engaged with honestly, transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, the painful into the sacred, and the fleeting into the timeless. This awareness sets the stage for the next part of our journey, discovering practical ways to embrace suffering, to meet life's challenges with presence, and to cultivate gratitude and insight in every moment. Because awakening is not just in ancient stories. It is alive in the ordinary struggles of your life, waiting for you to recognize it, learn from it, and walk fully into it. Stories and teachings can inspire, but the real transformation begins when we bring these insights into daily life. How do we actually practice gratitude in the midst of suffering? How do we turn hardship into a teacher, as the Buddha and countless awakened beings have shown us? The first step is awareness. It sounds simple, almost too obvious to be profound, but it is not. Awareness is the gateway to all wisdom. Without it, suffering remains a vague, overwhelming force, something we react to unconsciously. With awareness, we begin to see the patterns of our mind, the fears, the attachments, the habitual resistance that makes pain feel heavier than it is. Start small. Notice your breath when life feels difficult. Even a few conscious breaths can anchor you in the present, reminding you that the storm is passing through, not permanent. Observe the body, the tightness in your chest, the heaviness in your limbs. These sensations are messages, not enemies. Treat them as teachers, and allow gratitude to emerge simply for your ability to notice and learn. Second, embrace reflection. Ask yourself gentle, probing questions. What is this experience teaching me? What attachments, illusions, or expectations are being revealed? How might this challenge help me grow? Reflection transforms suffering from chaos into insight. It turns the raw, painful material of life into fuel for awareness and understanding. Writing can be an extraordinary tool here. Keep a journal not just of what hurts, but of what you learn from it. Note even the tiniest sparks of insight, moments of patience, or flashes of compassion. Over time, these reflections accumulate, creating a tapestry of wisdom born directly from your own struggles. Third, practice reframing. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine or forcing yourself into a false optimism. Reframing is simply seeing suffering through a wider lens. The illness that brings discomfort may reveal impermanence. The failure that shatters pride may awaken humility. The heartbreak that feels unbearable may deepen empathy. When we reframe in this way, gratitude arises naturally, not for the pain itself, but for the clarity, growth, and opportunity it provides. Fourth, cultivate compassion for yourself. Suffering can be isolating. The ordinary mind often adds layers of self-judgment. Why me? What did I do wrong? I should be stronger. Instead, offer kindness inward. Speak to yourself as you would to a dear friend. Acknowledge your pain without condemnation. This simple act of self-compassion softens the harshness of suffering, allowing gratitude and insight to take root. Fifth, extend compassion outward. Those who have faced suffering intimately often find it impossible to ignore the suffering of others. Acts of kindness, listening, supporting, or simply being present can turn personal hardship into a bridge connecting you to others. Gratitude grows as you witness the interconnectedness of life, realizing that your struggles are both unique and shared. Meditation, once again, is invaluable. Sitting quietly with suffering, observing it without judgment, and letting it flow through awareness cultivates an inner spaciousness. Within that space, gratitude naturally arises. You begin to see that even the darkest moments contribute to your journey, shaping character, perception, and understanding. Another practical approach is to actively seek lessons in daily challenges. Did someone speak harshly to you? Could it be teaching patience, humility, or restraint? Did you fail at something important? Could it reveal where growth is needed or highlight your resilience? By asking these questions consistently, the mind gradually shifts from resistance to curiosity, from despair to engagement, from fear to gratitude. Breathing, reflection, journaling, reframing, self-compassion, compassion for others, and meditation. These are not isolated techniques. They form a cohesive practice, a way of approaching life so that suffering becomes not a burden but a guide. There is a subtle but profound principle underlying all these practices. Gratitude is not a reaction to circumstances. It is a cultivation of awareness and choice. Even when life is harsh, even when pain is present, we can choose to see, to learn, to grow. This is the radical freedom the Buddha discovered. This is the gift hidden in every hardship. Consider a modern example. A woman faces the sudden loss of her home in a natural disaster. Initially, she is consumed by grief and anger, but through mindful reflection, journaling, and connecting with others in similar circumstances, she begins to notice resilience she never knew she had. She witnesses kindness in unexpected places, learns to release attachment to material possessions, and develops gratitude for the strength of community and the support of friends. Pain has become a teacher, and gratitude a natural companion. This is the essence of practical awakening, turning the raw material of life, loss, fear, illness, failure, into insight, compassion, and connection. It is not a theoretical exercise, it is a lived experience. And the more we practice, the more instinctive it becomes. Gratitude begins to emerge not just in meditation or reflection, but in every moment. A harsh word, a long line at the store, a difficult conversation, a stormy day. And here is the final, perhaps most important point. Consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need to transform your entire life overnight. Start with one breath, one reflection, one act of kindness, one acknowledgement of insight. Over time, these small practices compound, creating a resilient, grateful mind capable of meeting life fully, without resistance, without fear, and with the clarity and compassion of the awakened heart. Through these practices, suffering becomes less of a curse and more of a compass. It points toward what matters, reveals what is true, and teaches what cannot be learned through comfort or ease alone. And in this transformation, gratitude is not optional. It is inevitable. The awakened one does not wait for life to be free of difficulty. They do not postpone gratitude until the storm passes. Instead, they cultivate presence, awareness, and insight, discovering that even in suffering, life offers profound gifts. And it is this practice, these tangible daily methods, that allow anyone to turn hardship into wisdom, fear into understanding, and struggle into a path toward awakening. Have you ever noticed how those who have faced deep pain often have the capacity to understand others in ways the untouched cannot? There is a subtle magic in suffering. It opens the heart, softens the edges of the ego, and reveals the shared vulnerability of all beings. Compassion, in its deepest form, is born from suffering. The Buddha understood this intimately. His awakening under the Bodhi tree was not merely about personal liberation. It was about recognizing the suffering inherent in all life. He saw clearly the endless cycles of birth, aging, illness, and death. And it was this clarity, born from his own struggle, that fueled his compassion for every living being. Think of it this way. When we experience suffering ourselves, we develop an intimate knowledge of pain. We feel its weight, its unpredictability, its capacity to humble and transform. And because we have touched this reality, we can reach out to others with genuine empathy, offering understanding not as abstract advice, but as lived experience. Consider Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi. His early life was marked by tragedy, guilt, and the consequences of harmful actions. Yet through decades of solitary practice and self-discipline, he transformed his suffering into insight and compassion. His songs, written from the depth of his experience, continue to touch the hearts of thousands, guiding others to awaken through the reflection of shared struggle. Compassion born from suffering is different from pity. Pity maintains distance, it observes from the outside. True compassion enters the experience of another. It resonates with their pain, not in a way that diminishes their struggle, but in a way that affirms the shared humanity of suffering. It says, "I see you. I understand. You are not alone." This principle applies to everyday life. Think of someone who has lost a loved one. They are able to comfort others in similar grief with a depth of understanding that could never come from theory alone. A person who has faced illness or trauma can support others with patience and empathy that transcends mere words. Pain, once endured consciously and mindfully, becomes a bridge connecting hearts. The ordinary mind often struggles with this. When we have never faced profound suffering, we may judge, avoid, or underestimate the pain of others. We may offer empty reassurances. "It'll be fine," or "just get over it." But those who have walked the path of struggle themselves know that suffering cannot be dismissed. It must be witnessed, honored, and engaged with. Gratitude and compassion are intimately linked. In Chapter 5, we explored gratitude in the midst of struggle. Now, consider how that gratitude extends outward. When we recognize that our own hardships have been teachers, we begin to appreciate the struggles of others. We see that they too are learning, growing, and awakening in their own ways. Compassion naturally flows from this recognition. Practically speaking, cultivating compassion through suffering involves several key practices. 1. Mindful presence. Be fully present with your own suffering first. Observe it, understand it, and honor it. Only then can you extend authentic presence to others. 2. Reflective empathy. When witnessing the suffering of others, recall your own experiences. Allow that memory to inform your understanding, creating a bridge between your heart and theirs. 3. Active kindness. Compassion is not passive. Offer support, words of encouragement, or simply attentive listening. Small acts can profoundly impact those in pain. 4. Shared humanity. Recognize that suffering is universal. Your pain and theirs is part of the same human experience. This awareness diminishes judgment, comparison, and separation. 5. Integration. Through practice, meditation, reflection, and mindfulness are essential. They allow the heart to remain open, the mind to remain clear, and compassion to arise naturally rather than from obligation or habit. A personal story illustrates this beautifully. A young man, having survived a serious accident, found himself volunteering at a rehabilitation center. Initially, he did so out of gratitude for his recovery. But as he worked with patients, listening to their fears, witnessing their pain, he discovered a profound compassion that could only have come from having faced suffering himself. His empathy was authentic, grounded in the reality of what it means to endure, to struggle, and to heal. The awakened one embodies this principle fully. They do not merely experience personal liberation. They respond to suffering with understanding and love. Their compassion is fearless, unrestricted, and universally inclusive. It does not discriminate between friend and stranger, familiar and unknown, easy and difficult. It flows naturally, like water finding its way down a mountain, touching all lives in its path. In practical life, we can begin to cultivate this same quality. Notice the suffering around you, at work, in your community, even in strangers' lives. Rather than turning away, pause, breathe. Reflect on your own experiences of hardship. Let that memory open your heart. Then act, even in small ways, to relieve suffering where you can. Over time, this practice strengthens your capacity for empathy, patience, and love. Compassion born from suffering transforms not only how we relate to others, but how we relate to ourselves. We learn to soften our judgment, to honor our own struggles, and to respond to challenges with patience and wisdom. It is the ultimate alchemy, turning personal pain into collective healing. And here lies the subtle beauty of this practice. The more we embrace suffering with awareness, gratitude, and compassion, the less frightening it becomes. Pain is no longer a force to flee from, but a teacher guiding us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. In this way, awakening becomes not just personal liberation, but a force that ripples outward, touching every life we encounter. Pain is inevitable. Everyone experiences it, sooner or later, in ways both small and immense. Yet the Buddha and countless awakened beings have shown that beyond the fire of suffering lies a profound freedom, a state not of avoidance, but of understanding, acceptance, and liberation. The ordinary mind clings to comfort, fearing pain as an enemy. It runs, resists, or numbs itself to avoid the discomfort that life naturally brings. And yet, in this resistance lies entrapment. The more we resist, the tighter the chains that bind us. Pain does not disappear, it only gains strength through our struggle. The awakened mind takes a radically different approach. It does not seek to annihilate suffering, but to understand it. It does not demand that life conform to its desires, but observes reality as it is. It recognizes that pain, in all its forms, is transient, teaching, and ultimately transformable. And within this recognition, freedom arises. Freedom beyond pain is not a denial of experience. It is an embrace of reality. Imagine sitting beside a river. The water is turbulent, cold, and fast. If you struggle against it, fighting every wave, you exhaust yourself. But if you let the river flow around you, observing, moving with it, learning from its currents, you find a surprising ease. The river remains the same, but your experience changes. This is freedom. Consider the story of a monk meditating during a harsh winter. His fingers numb, his back aching. He faces the cold without complaint or resistance. Each shiver, each pang of discomfort becomes a teacher. The body is in pain, yes, but the mind is free. By facing suffering directly, without clinging, without aversion, the monk discovers a space within himself that is untouched, unshakable, serene. This freedom is also deeply personal. It arises when we let go of the illusion that life should be only pleasant, only comfortable, only predictable. When we accept that life contains impermanence, uncertainty, and difficulty, we begin to see suffering as neither punishment nor enemy. It becomes part of the fabric of existence, a thread woven into the tapestry of life. Practical freedom beyond pain involves a few essential principles. 1. Acceptance. Recognize the reality of suffering without resistance. To fight it is to be trapped. To accept it is to release tension and open the mind. 2. Mindful observation. Observe pain with clarity. Notice its arising, its movement, its impermanence. Awareness transforms the raw intensity of suffering into insight. 3. Non-attachment. Release the craving for life to be different than it is. This does not mean indifference, but a deep acknowledgement that clinging multiplies suffering. 4. Compassion. Extend understanding to yourself and others. Freedom is inseparable from the recognition of shared humanity. 5. Integration let the lessons of suffering inform your choices, actions, and perceptions. Wisdom grows from engagement, not avoidance. Imagine the small moments of life: a disagreement with a friend, a setback at work, a twinge of illness. Each is a microcosm of the larger flow of life. Meeting these moments with mindfulness, gratitude, and compassion cultivates the freedom to navigate existence without being enslaved by fear or aversion. Even profound suffering, like the loss of a loved one, can lead to liberation. By embracing grief fully, observing it, and allowing it to teach, one discovers a space within that is beyond despair. It is a place of clarity, presence, and deep understanding. It is the realization that while pain touches life, it cannot destroy the mind's inherent freedom. The Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths illustrates this elegantly. Suffering exists, its causes are identifiable, it can be transcended, and there is a path, the Eightfold Path, that leads to its cessation. Freedom beyond pain is not wishful thinking. It is the result of careful practice, observation, and transformation. Stories of awakening throughout history confirm this. Those who have faced extreme adversity, war, exile, illness, loss, often report that their greatest clarity and freedom emerged only after confronting and fully embracing the reality of suffering. Pain, when met directly, becomes a mirror revealing the depth of the mind and the expansiveness of the heart. Ultimately, the freedom beyond pain is a gift available to anyone willing to meet life fully, without avoidance or denial. It is the state of the awakened mind, clear, compassionate, and at peace, even amidst the storms of existence. It is the realization that life, in all its impermanence and difficulty, is precisely the teacher we need. As we move toward the conclusion of this journey, we are invited to reflect. What would it mean to meet every challenge, every discomfort, every loss with awareness, gratitude, and compassion? What if every pain became a guide, every struggle a stepping stone toward clarity and freedom? The answer is the awakened life, a life lived fully, freely, and with a heart open to all experiences. As our journey comes full circle, we return to a simple yet profound truth. Gratitude is not merely a polite response to life's gifts, it is the path itself. The awakened one does not wait for perfect circumstances, nor for a life free of hardship to feel thankful. Gratitude arises in the heart that has seen clearly, that has met suffering, and that has learned to embrace life exactly as it is. From the hidden gift of pain to the freedom beyond suffering, every chapter of this journey points to the same insight. Life teaches through challenges. Each loss, each disappointment, each moment of fear or doubt carries within it the seed of awakening. The mind that resists creates chains. The mind that opens in awareness discovers liberation. Gratitude is the bridge that connects these experiences, turning suffering into insight, struggle into growth, and hardship into wisdom. Consider the ordinary moments that make up most of our lives. The interruptions, the mistakes, the conflicts, and the daily disappointments. How often do we notice them? How often do we recognize that these very moments, when met with awareness, are teachers? They remind us of impermanence, patience, humility, and compassion. They show us where we cling, where we fear, and where we have the opportunity to awaken. Gratitude transforms perception. It does not erase pain, but it changes our relationship to it. The pangs of discomfort, the challenges we once dreaded, become portals, inviting us to witness life fully, to embrace its richness, and to cultivate wisdom. The Buddha, Milarepa, the Zen masters, and countless awakened beings throughout history have all illuminated this path. Suffering need not be an enemy. It can be the most honest, patient, and uncompromising teacher. We cultivate gratitude in practice, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a state of mind. Mindfulness, reflection, compassionate action, and daily acknowledgement of life's lessons all train the heart to remain open, steady, and receptive. Gratitude becomes a living force, shaping our reactions, guiding our choices, and illuminating the smallest and largest moments alike. Imagine living each day with this awareness. The discomforts of life no longer dominate the mind. Failures are not threats, but mirrors revealing where growth is needed. Losses are not curses, but teachers unveiling impermanence and deepening appreciation. Even joy is experienced more fully, richer in depth, because it is intertwined with gratitude for the journey that has brought us here. Gratitude also connects us to others. When we recognize our own suffering as a teacher, we naturally extend empathy and compassion outward. We see the struggles of friends, family, and strangers not as inconveniences, but as reflections of our shared humanity. In this recognition, relationships deepen, acts of kindness multiply, and the heart opens in ways impossible to force or fabricate. In this way, gratitude is not a passive response. It is an active, transformative engagement with life. It is a lens through which every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes meaningful. It is the daily practice of the awakened mind, the quiet teacher that turns ordinary life into extraordinary insight. And so, the journey comes to its gentle conclusion. We have walked from the hidden gifts of pain, through the Buddha's insight, through resistance, learning and gratitude, into compassion, and finally into freedom beyond suffering. At each step, gratitude has been the thread weaving the lessons together, the invisible force transforming hardship into wisdom, fear into clarity, and struggle into awakening. As you move forward in your own life, remember this. Every challenge, every difficulty, every heartache carries a gift if you are willing to notice it. Every moment, even the smallest, can awaken awareness if met with presence, patience, and an open heart. Gratitude is not something to be earned. It is a recognition, a choice, a practice, and ultimately the path itself. In embracing gratitude fully, we do not merely survive life, we awaken to it. We meet pain with understanding, struggle with curiosity, and joy with appreciation. We walk the path of the awakened, not in distant ideal, but in the immediacy of every breath, every sensation, every moment of our human existence. Life is teaching and gratitude is listening. Life is challenging and gratitude is the compass. Life is fleeting and gratitude is the awareness that allows us to live fully awake. This is the gift of the awakened one. To meet life exactly as it is, to learn from suffering, to cultivate compassion, and to walk each day with a heart full of gratitude. The path to true liberation, the awakening that begins and ends with the simple, profound recognition that every experience, even the hardest, is a teacher. If these words have touched you, if the journey through suffering, gratitude, and awakening resonates in your heart, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom and step gently into a space where each video is a guide to mindful living, compassion, and insight. Turn on notifications and allow each story, each teaching to meet you where you are, quietly, deeply, and with presence. Together, let us walk the path of awakening, one mindful moment at a time.